Well, there's one thing that can be said about Alita Battle Angel. It was definitely one big love letter to anime fans and fans of manga. That's for sure. Alita Battle Angel is an American adaptation of a manga. I believe it was also an anime at one time. I'm not completely familiar with the source material. It tells the tale of Alita, who was found in a dump yard, a scrap heap. Her body was broken, but her human mind was still intact and still alive. The doctor who finds her gives her a new body, revives her, and pretty much treats her like she's his daughter. Unfortunately for Alita, she doesn't have any memory of anything before she was revived, and so she is ultimately learning things again. And ultimately, this movie becomes a discovery of who she really is, who she will become. It is a very character-driven story for her. And ultimately finding herself and realizing what role she has to play in this world. There are definitely a few things that I really liked about Alita. For one, the visual effects are pretty damn stunning, and it reminds me of when James Cameron made Avatar. Now, James Cameron is just producing this movie. It's Robert Rodriguez who directed it, the one who made Sin City and a bunch of other movies that he's famous for. But it does have that feel of this really great visual effects movie that may be lacking in story department, but the visuals are outstanding and really damn amazing to look at, even though there are moments where it just feels like it's overblown to the point where clearly the characters were just on a blue screen and almost everything around them was computer created. I really enjoyed the action sequences in this movie. It was all filmed well, edited well. There was a flow to it. There was a great choreograph to it. I was really entertained by the action sequences, especially this bar fight that happens between Alita and all these bounty hunters. That was probably my favorite scene in the entire movie, at least when it comes to action. I did like the characters in this movie as well. I enjoyed Alita the most. She was our main character, and there's something about an innocent character that has either a dark past or has this soldier or this fighter inside of them that slowly comes out in weird spurts. Sort of like their memory of them being this soldier coming to them in moments when they need it. I don't know, there's something about that type of character that I've liked in other movies, and it was done well in Alita. I also liked how Rosa Salazar played Alita in this movie. Granted, there is a lot of innocent moments which I think could come off as awkward to some people because she's new and naive, and it's like, oh, this is such a great place and this neat, new, interesting thing. And that could come off as some weird facial expressions when it comes to that sort of excitement. But I thought she played that innocence really well. And when she gets to the badass moments where she has to fight, I thought she portrayed that just as well. Christoph Waltz plays Dr. Ido, the person who brings her or revives her and sort of becomes the father character to our main character. I like how his backstory was revealed, and I like his relationship with Alita, this father-daughter relationship. Ed Skrein is in this movie as well as a bounty hunter, and to be honest, he was my favorite villain or my favorite antagonist of the movie because he was the most memorable. He felt like the only antagonist with something to prove to himself and the only one that was a little bit complex. Well, since I've already started talking about the villains, I might as well continue with the villains, and that'll help transition into what I disliked about Alita. The main thing, the villains were just really weak really awful villains. And I don't mean awful in the sense that they were these really bad guys that needed to be taken down. No, just awful in the sense that there's no character to most of the villains in this film. Like I said, Ed Skrein's bounty hunter villain was the only one that had some complexity to it, because he's this bounty hunter and he was embarrassed by Alita because she beat him in the bar, and he wants to take out his revenge by trying to kill her boyfriend and trying to frame him so that he is allowed to kill the boyfriend. That's the only complex thing when it comes to the villains of this movie, and that's ultimately not that complex, but it's more complex than any of the other things. I mean, Jennifer Connelly could be considered an antagonist in this film, and she actually has a character development. She has a change, so that's a complex villain. But Mahershala Ali's character, the big brute robot character that's also hunting down Alita, as well as the main villain of the film, are all very weak, very one-dimensional, very boring villains. Gruishka is that big robot character, that big cyborg that is constantly trying to kill Alita in the trailers. He becomes the main physical antagonist of the movie, but ultimately he's just this big brute puppet that, I mean, he also feels embarrassed by her because she beat him once and he wants to return the favor by killing her. And I mean, that's all there is to it with him. Mahershala Ali, he's Vector in this film, and he is probably the most boring villain in this entire film. They could have had anyone else play it. Mahershala Ali is a really good actor, and I feel bad for him, but ultimately his character in the film is just a puppet for the main villain. He barely has a character in this entire film because he's constantly being taken over by the main villain, who uses him as a puppet in order to voice his commands. I mean, you can draw a little sympathy for him because he's almost like a tragic villain in a way, because he's just someone's pawn. But I almost feel nothing for him. Actually, I really feel nothing for him because he just doesn't even have a character in this film. He's not a character. He's just a thing. The main villain, on the other hand, doesn't even... I mean, he has lines of dialogue because he takes over people and those people voice his dialogue, but the main actor that actually plays him technically doesn't say a word because the other actors say it for him. And there's this big reveal at the end that it's a famous, pretty big actor that's playing him, and that was kind of pointless. It was almost like the reveal in Fantastic Beasts when the main villain turned out to be Johnny Depp. Like, whoa. But in this one, it's less of a surprise. Now, there are a lot of cliches in this movie, particularly anime cliches or manga cliches. But to be honest, I was definitely not bothered by it. I can understand people that aren't fans of manga or aren't fans of anime will just see it as all this typical science fiction cliche of a science fiction dystopia world with cyborgs and all this other stuff that's been done before. But honestly, that just feels like classic to me, or classic anime, classic manga to me. And to fans of that will probably love it even more than I did. And I admired it. Now, one of the things that didn't work for me, and I wish it did, because this section of the movie clearly meant to be very impactful, and it has all the right plot points to have a tragic romance in this film. Unfortunately, the romance itself doesn't feel like it's developed well enough for me to truly care. Now, granted, it has all the plot points for a good tragic romance. I just wish it would have been developed more and done better. And I don't know if this was done better in the anime or the manga, if some of this stuff was developed more, but some of the world building, it's there, but they could have went deeper on some of the lore and some of the world building, especially with her memories that she gets. A lot of the memories just doesn't really matter too much to the movie, I guess, but in the end, you kind of want to know a little bit more about her past because it looks like she was this badass soldier that had a mission. And I can see people really loving this movie, but for me, I'm going to have to give Alita 3 stars. Yeah, the weak villains and the weak romance plot really brought it down for me. Plus, I've seen better blockbuster movies that have a better story and something that's more engaging and action-packed at the same time. This one was more great action, great characters, and visual effects, lacking a little bit on the story, even though it does have a classic anime manga feel to it that I did admire. So, did you see Alita? What'd you think about it? Go ahead and comment below. And if you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe and check out my movie reviews or countdowns of this year, of previous years, of whatever. As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.